Welcome to The Connection Code, a podcast where we explore the relationships that make your life and work a little bit better.
Hi, I'm Rachel Gilman-Rischel. I run a PR firm called 3PR, focused on entrepreneurial food brands, but I am passionate, and some might even say obsessed, with making introductions and connecting good people.
And I'm Gina Anderson Cohen. I've spent around 13 years building a business called A Sweat Life that helps adults make friends. I've learned a lot along the way.
So we're going to start each episode with a big question, and inspired by our very first guest today, this is the big ask, and I want Gina to go first. How can you create personal and professional connections when you're starting from scratch, when you don't have a network already in place? Because I think once you have a base, it's so much easier to be additive, but when you have nothing and you really need to go out there and forge new relationships, how do you do it?
It's such a good question. I'm so excited for you to hear the answers on this episode today. I will start with this. The first thing to do if you're starting from scratch, moving somewhere new, maybe a new job, a new city, is ask for help. Thing number one, put it out there. Ask for help. Ask friends who live in the current city if you're moving for help with what you're doing. So if I were to say, I'm moving, Rachel, to New York City, and I really want to make friends who want to work out with me. That plants the seed in your head, like, who do I know in New York City who loves to work out? So you can start doing the work to connect me because people want to help you.
Yes, and that specificity is good, not just I'm moving to a new city, I need people, but giving them a little bit of a pathway of fitness oriented, or saying, I want to work in this particular profession, or I'm a big runner. Do you know anybody who likes to run? I actually weirdly think that specificity helps foster introductions more than generality.
Rules make fun. I really think that rules, guardrails, like, actually give people more ideas than if you were to just say, like, is there anybody in New York you think I should meet? Like, who's like me? I don't know. But if you give the guardrails, it's so much easier.
This is a weird comparison, but if you said, let's go out to dinner, and I said, oh, what are you in the mood for? And you said anything, I'm going to be stumped. But if you said, I would love a great sushi restaurant or Italian and gluten-free, then I can brainstorm accordingly. So I think you're totally right in making a brilliant point that tapping your network for where you're going, or trying to reach out to anybody who can facilitate intros, but giving them a little bit of direction actually will pay off more.
Totally agree. And then the other thing I would say is look for the friendship leaders, because the thing that I think is really unique to thriving communities is a leader who facilitates friendship. So if you're looking for a way to make friends quickly, look for a group that has a leader. Look for people who say, like, I love this run club because every week the leader introduces you if you're new, or I've made 3 friends through the group. Bingo, that's a good leader. That's someone who is doing the work for you.
So not an alpha personality in a group, but an actual established leader.
An actual established leader.
Smart.
And when I think about a friendship leader, I think about someone who is there for others, not there for the platform. So their whole role, as if you're thinking about a dinner party, for example, their whole role is to make sure your experience is great, that you meet other people, that you have a connection. Those are the people who actually lead others to make friends and connections. I think it's true in networking too. What about you, Rachel?
I was just thinking how much you are a friendship leader and how I would want to connect people with you if they were looking to crack open a new group. So that's you.
Oh, thank you.
I was thinking about this as well, because going back to college days, I really wanted to get my foot in the door in marketing, advertising, PR. And I had not much at my disposal as a senior in college. But the 2 pieces of advice I would offer if you are in that boat of really starting from scratch is, first, a theory of one. One good contact can actually be all you need to really get started. Somebody who is well-networked, generous, and willing to make multiple introductions can be more valuable to you than if you have a bunch of varied contacts who don't go anywhere. So hyper focusing on one high value person, I think, will pay greater dividends than a lot of people who might be polite enough to have a 30-minute call and never take a secondary step. So it might not be as easy to identify, but I think with LinkedIn at your disposal, social media, a little creative Sherlock detective work, you could probably find the right personality who could be your one person, and then be so gracious, so appreciative, so helpful in any way you can, and nurture that one relationship. But I do believe that the power of one. The next thing is a little more administrative, but I also give this advice a lot to college students. So when I was a college senior who was not making a lot of progress in my job search and experiencing peak anxiety, I was tapping anybody my parents knew, including a couple they ran into at a bar mitzvah party and sat next to at dinner, and said, "Oh, this couple's son works at J. Walter Thompson." And he ended up becoming one of my closest friends in Chicago. But that was the degree of random with which I was working. And I was going to the school counselor. I was in the B school, and I was asking for alumni recommendations. Like, I was really, really combing for anything. So I made a spreadsheet, and I would say the name of the company, the name of the person, their role, their contact information, when we spoke, what we spoke about, the last time I followed up, and any additional notes. And then I printed that spreadsheet and I stuck it on my bedroom wall. And as much as I was hating my non-existent job search and I was so worried I have to move back into my parents' basement in Minnesota, I forced myself to work the spreadsheet for 20 minutes a day. So go find somebody on that spreadsheet and send them another note, or see if they could make an introduction or check in. And I just kept trying to add names to my spreadsheet and keep those relationships fresh and activated so that I could hopefully start something. And what's crazy is that it worked. And I ended up with 3 internship offers in Chicago, and I was able to pick the one that felt the best, and that launched my PR career. So, theory of one, and manage in an organized fashion your relationships. Actually keep track of the people in your network, because you'll forget. You'll be like, "Oh, that person was great. I'll always remember them." And it's just not true. Like, do the work to create a spreadsheet with multiple tabs and be really mindful in the way that you would with sales leads, so that you don't forget good contacts, and you're also reminded to go back to them with some degree of frequency, and ensure you're staying in touch so that you don't only reach out when you need something.
Oh my gosh, Rachel, I just feel like, was that just incredible foresight? Did you learn that from somewhere? Where did that behavior come from? Because girlfriend built a CRM.
I wish I could tell you that there was like some tactical brilliance. I was petrified. I literally was staring down the barrel of spring semester, and I'm like, if my parents invested this much in my college education and I graduate the business school with no job and no internship, and I have to move back and continue waitressing, which I was doing, I just was so concerned that I was going to feel like a failure. And I wanted my parents to think that I had done a good job. And I also really wanted to move to Chicago. So I think you can take desperation and acute fear and really translate and transmute that into something powerful. But I don't know, it ended up being kind of a good life practice of just keeping track of introductions and trying to ensure you don't lose those relationships, especially as you amass more. And again, LinkedIn wasn't in existence. Now it does a lot of the work for you. But I do often encourage college students to be really deliberate. I wish I had noted great professors. I wish I had been a little smarter about good contacts at the university, because once I graduated and I lost that undergrad email, I lost those relationships too.
Yeah, you can find them now.
But my memory isn't good.
Yeah. Wait, Rachel, do you want to tell us about who we're interviewing today on the podcast?
I would love to gush about this. Thank you, Gina, for letting me go with my girl crush here. So this is a very exciting episode because it's our first official interview where Gina and I have moved from capsule conversations to bringing somebody else in. But from our very initial brainstorms about starting a podcast, we knew we wanted to chat with somebody special. And we wanted somebody who asks deep and thoughtful questions. We wanted somebody who's well-versed in interviews herself, and a person we admire. And so we got to welcome today the wonderful Danielle Robay. She is a media personality, a content creator, a moderator, and the host of my very favorite podcast, which is called Question Everything. And she even created a Question Everything card game with 52 prompts for deeper discussion. So she is just an all-around incredible person who I deeply admire. I value our friendship so much. And I think it's just such a gift to be able to dive into discussion topics with her around the importance of connection.
I loved all of the anecdotes she shared with us in this interview. You'll hear about US presidents. You'll hear about people who helped her along the way. And
bamboo plants.
Honestly, I don't think that we've laughed as much. We got close to crying. What a great interview.
Yes, I'm really excited to share it. Hi, Danielle Robay.
Oh my God. Hi, Rachel and Gina. I'm so happy to be hanging out with you. I wish I was on the same couch.
I would love to welcome you to the couch. I am so happy to see your beautiful face, and I have been looking forward to this since we really originated the idea of the podcast. I was like, Danielle's number one, if she says yes.
I really feel honored because you and I have become like such good friends. I hope I don't overstate our friendship, but in my mind, we're really close friends.
we are soulful friends. Yes.
Yes, you're like my soul sister. And then when you met Gina, I remembered her from when I was doing the show in Chicago, and I was like, this makes so much sense because Gina's so soulful and so heartfelt and so smart. And I was like, the two of you together, this is going to be amazing.
Well, first of all, the fact that you had that impression of me when I was coming on the show to do like cute little workout segments.
Oh no, but it was so much more than that because you had started your own company.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I thought that about you too. I think you're great. And when Rachel brought you up, you were honestly like a list of 3. It was like Dream Connections, Danielle Robay.
I was like Danielle and Gail King.
Yeah.
There's a big chasm between the two of us. Someone is going to space, somebody is staying on Earth.
The space thing has even risen her further in my mind. I am pretty excited about her voyage.
What did I miss? Gail King's going to space.
She's doing a Blue Origin flight.
So the connections that we listed in episode 1 of our Dream
included
Connections,
an astronaut.
Obviously, we predicted it. We're psychic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Danielle, you have my favorite podcast, and in no small part inspired my desire to have a podcast. So I just have to say that Question Everything, previously Pretty Smart, card game included, is to me like the gold standard of deep conversation and connection. And I wanted to actually begin with a compliment I've been thinking about for you, which is that you are one of the most engaged and present and attentive listeners I have ever encountered. And to be listened to by you feels like having a really golden light that is shining upon you. So to be on the other end of conversation with you and to have you receive words is to feel just so innately special and taken care of. And I think that's your gift.
Thank you so much for saying that, Rach. I actively try to listen. And so I'm not sure that most people see listening as generosity or like a gift the way that you do. And it actually takes like a lot of love and energy. And so for you to see that and recognize that in me makes me feel so seen. And thank you for that.
It's so true. And I think your podcast only really works because you give your guests such full attention. You ask such thoughtful follow-up questions. You never interrupt with your own agenda. It's just a really beautiful skill that is less overt, but so important. And I just wanted to call that out because if this is all about connection, you do so much to help people feel connected because they're safe with you.
Thank you for saying that. I grew up in so I'm from Chicago, but I grew up in my extended family is very judgmental. And not much my like nuclear family, but I grew up around a lot of judgment. And as I started to unlearn in my college years and adult years, I really made a point to try and give that to other people, which I think is in tangent with listening. And one time I asked my therapist, this woman, Stella, who's sadly no longer my therapist, but she was the first person.
Also my former therapist, thanks to you.
I didn't want to share if you didn't want to share.
It's okay, Stella. I only wanted Stella because she was your therapist. Yes.
Well, she was such a special person. And she was the first person that I really felt like listened to me with without judgment whatsoever. And I know that she was a paid person, but I looked at her one day and I said, Stella, how can I give this gift to other people in my life? Because like every week you give me such a gift. And she said, Danielle, you're not going to like this answer. And I said, okay, what will, it's like a skill, right? Like, what can I do? And she said, in order to not judge other people, we have to stop judging ourselves first. And you are your harshest critic. And I had been trying so hard to be outwardly non-judgmental while judging myself so deeply. And so then I kind of switched it after that. And I really worked on not judging me as much. And that's like real freedom, you know?
Yes. Oh, Stella's wisdom. She would really come at you with the heart of the matter. And sometimes it was difficult to digest, but she was always right. And that's a beautiful insight. And I do feel like you walk through the world not being a judgmental person, a very curious person, and somebody who can ask thought-provoking questions and examine behavior and the way of being, but not doing it from a place of judgment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think you do the same.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
thank you. Yeah. There are better days and there are worse days.
Of course.
I think it's a practice, honestly.
Yes.
Just like you're saying, I think you sort of have to, because you get lost if you have a lot on your mind. It's easy to get lost in the, ooh, this will be a good story, or oh, I can't wait to share. But if you give the gift of listening, it doesn't matter what good story comes up. You have to engage in that
Gina,
moment.
do you feel like there was a point in your life where you got better at it? Like, was there a switch?
Yeah.
Me
College.
too.
So I feel like, and you tell me, was there a point pre-Stella?
No, I think that was the turning point for me. And it turned me in, not just as like a better listener, or a better interviewer, but it made me a better friend, a better daughter, a better sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in college, and this isn't about me because we don't have that much time with you, but I just remember in the dorms, like actively having this moment of like, I can't wait to tell this story, and inserting it into like 4 conversations and being like, how'd that go for you, Gina? Like, how was that received? Did people laugh the way you thought that they would? And having to have a real like internal conversation about like, maybe you should ask questions.
Whoa, that's so much self-awareness for college.
Yeah. Well, I think journalism school helped because you're asking questions.
Yeah.
Speaking of questions, we have so many for you.
Yes, I know. Oh,
I can't wait.
So this is kind of, I'm going to go back to, you said you're from Chicago, but here you are in LA. And I think a lot of people who grew up in the Midwest say, oh my gosh, I'm going to move to LA and I'm going to pursue this big career. And it is such a rarity to do it, which you did. But LA is all about many industries, but especially I think the entertainment business is about connections. Yeah. And you took this big, bold, scary move to go out to LA in your 20s, and you didn't have a network, and you didn't have something you could tap into to make it infinitely easier. And even though I'm blessed to know the story already, I wondered if you could share for people who are trying to figure out how to network without any pre-existing base, what did it look like for you to go connection-free into a place and try to find a network?
It's such a good question. No one's ever asked me that before. First of all, I think I've actually been reflecting on this a lot lately because I think I've reached the point in my career where a lot of young girls who are in college are reaching out to me on LinkedIn or Instagram or cold emailing me and saying like, I'm interested in journalism. I'd love 10 minutes with you. And they're all doing it wrong. I've only had one girl reach out to me and do it in a way that I think is like really wonderful. So I do think that it is a skill set. And I just want to say that I did it wrong too. I did it super wrong, and it's okay at the beginning, but I wish I would have had information.
Share the wisdom, yes.
Yeah, I think the first thing is there's this fine line between adding value and overstating your skill set, because when you're young, you really don't have a lot to give somebody. It's maybe you could with like social media skill set, but more so you are wanting, you want your foot in the door, you want to learn. And so I think it's important to be gracious in that reach out, and and offer what you can, whether it's time or free social media work or anything, just so you can let the other person know that you're willing to help as much as you want help. And so like I always like a little give with an ask. And then also really succinct. People don't have a lot of time. I remember sending emails with bullet points because people don't reply to paragraphs, or bolding certain words because executives just do not have a lot of time. And I'd always research something about them. So I remember there was this guy, Brandon Reig, and he was the head of non-scripted at NBC. He's now the head of Netflix unscripted. And I had no connection point to him, and I saw that he was a political science major, and I had been a political science major. And so I just used that, and that was the thing that he said to me on the phone when he agreed to meet with me just for like a 10-minute phone call that stood out because he did get a lot of emails. And so I think just finding a point of connection and letting people know that you really did your research, especially when you're young, is super important. And then as you get a bit older, Rachel, I think you probably can speak to this even better than I can, but I love emailing or connecting with people when I don't need anything at all. I love sending an email that says, oh, I saw you do this great thing, I'm cheering you on. Or even better, like if you have something to offer, I try and do this as much as I can because it brings me joy. But like my friend Kathleen is launching a big new hub for female entrepreneurs in LA after the fires. And I said, I'm so excited to see this. Can I send you emails of 5 people that I think would be great for like under this umbrella? Just to be like an add value person, I think is so helpful. And people don't forget that, you know?
Mm-hmm. I fully agree. And didn't you also, when you are a chutzpah-filled 20-something coming to LA, didn't you also send cookies, or you sent something tangible so people would open your mail?
I did. I don't know if this works anymore. Maybe it does. I wouldn't send people cookies or anything edible anymore. But I did send, I sent bamboo plants and cookies because no one would reply to my emails. And so my mom sold mortgages, and I grew up watching her send out like holiday gifts with handwritten notes to all of her clients and her like process. So I won't bore you with all the people in her mortgage-filled life, but I remember thinking maybe I should do that. And so I sent bamboo plants with a little note saying like, hey, I know we haven't been able to get in touch. I'm new to LA. Here's what I'm looking to do. If anything ever becomes available, I could be there the next day. And that's actually how I got my foot in the door. One of those companies that I had sent cookies to, a woman had emailed me back saying, we don't have anything. And I said, no worries, I'd still love to come to the office and meet you in person. And she allowed me to. And then 6 months later, she called me and she said, our host is sick. Can you be at the Paley Center in Beverly Hills in 2 hours? And I said, yeah.
Hair and makeup done. Be right there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I love this story, your story, for so many reasons. But I think if I was going to take it down to some core lessons, first of all, you had tenacity. You didn't give up. If people weren't responding to emails, you said, let me find a side door. I will send you a bamboo plant, or I'll send you cookies. Yeah. Creativity of not just going with the tried and true, sending a blanket email and hoping for the best. And also just imbuing thoughtfulness and a little personality, whether it's your poli-sci major or the fact that you're researching people ahead of time. I think all these things innately distinguish you from all the other applicants. And then sure enough, you got your foot in the door, you started building a network, which I guess leads to the question of, so say somebody does a Danielle and they are successful in starting to create these little relationships and they planted all these seeds. Yeah. What do you do, or do you have advice on maintaining, nurturing, kind of going next level with those new relationships?
That's a good question. I think that it, for me, it depends on the context of where we met, what the relationship is. I don't like to, and maybe this is a vulnerability thing because you're so good at this, Rachel. I don't like to be too in people's face. I get like embarrassed or shy. And I think you actually could probably speak to this better than me. You have a really beautiful way of just plopping in and saying like, hey, thinking about you. I actually don't know if I have a great answer for this except for an anecdote that I think about a lot.
Oh, I love an anecdote.
And I saw a former general of the U.S. Army speak probably about 7 years ago. And at the end of his talk, we got to ask questions, and somebody asked such a brilliant question. They said, you've overseen or you've worked for five presidents in your career. What is something about each person that has stood out to you? And he said that Obama actually made him a little nervous, that he would walk into the Oval Office and he was never sure if Obama liked him or not. And he thought that that was like a great tactic that Obama probably used in meetings. And he said he was very professorial. He was like a beautiful orator. And then he said Clinton made everybody feel special. Like there could be 15,000 people in the room and he's talking to you and you feel like you're the only person in the room. And he was like, that's a superpower, you know? And he said George W. Bush was super funny. He used humor as a tool. And then he said George Bush Sr. Was incredible with relationships, that he would call world leaders every single day. He had a list of world leaders that he would call and check in with and say hello. And he said he got so much done because by the time he needed to call the Chancellor of Germany because he needed something 6 months down the road, they already had a relationship. He didn't have to do all the formalities and meet with the secretaries and fly there. He could just pick up the phone and said, hey, like, I need this. And so that's really what I think about all the time is like, how can I be like George Bush Sr. in that sense? Not in all senses.
I just have a big sigh because I love this anecdote. And like, it's so you to pull out a perfect, rather obscure example that speaks exactly to the thing I'm trying to figure out or trying to shed some light on. But isn't that brilliant? And isn't that the point? As you said earlier, don't start relationships when you need something because it's too late and it already feels like a transaction. And the person on the receiving end knows it's a transaction. And even all these young women who are reaching out, which I feel like it must be a season of life because I'm getting a lot of those too, are so well-meaning, but it is inherently a transaction where I bet if somebody reached out to you and said, Danielle, I listened to your recent episode with Ashlyn, the soccer player, and there were 3 things that she said that really struck me. You asked amazing questions. It was such a powerful dialogue. I'm still thinking about it. I actually sent it to a couple friends of mine. I just wanted to let you know I'm a fan. What are you going to do? You're going to write back and say, thank you so much for listening. That's amazing. And then that girl could write back again and say, oh, I'm so glad you wrote me back. I'm so flattered. Actually, if you have 10 minutes, I would love to talk to you about XYZ.
And then how do you say no? You're so stuck. Of course you're going to say yes.
Exactly.
And that's how you get 10 minutes of a famous person's time.
Yeah. I mean, you know what's funny is I used to work at Entertainment Tonight online, and we worked crazy hours, and I worked the night shift. And so I would be done at 9 p.m. and most people had gone home. And so I would stay a little bit late and I would watch all these old interviews because they had an they've been on air for I think like 40 years. So they have an incredible library of clips. And I wanted to learn from people. And I was obsessed with Jennifer Lopez. And so I watched every Jennifer Lopez interview that there was. And everybody would say that Jennifer Lopez was the hardest working woman in Hollywood. And then I heard all these interviews and she would say, the difference between me and anybody else is that I didn't give up. Like I just kept on. And like, she's probably not the best singer. She's a good dancer. I don't know if she's the best dancer. Like, it was never about that. She was like, I just never gave up. And I think about that too, because like, if you really want to get in touch with somebody, if there's a will, there's a way.
Yes.
Well, I'm wondering, just as you were talking about being tenacious and you were talking about all the effort you put in to get in touch with folks that would inevitably open the door for you, was there a time when you felt like giving up, and what kept you going?
Oh, I still feel like giving up. I have those moments all of the time. Probably the biggest one I can point to is It was right before COVID hit, so 2019. And I had moved to LA. I was doing entertainment news. I got my foot in the door at an outlet that I thought would be my dream job. I was the youngest person they hired. And it turned out to be something that it was not for me. I realized I did not like talking about people's lives. All that glitters was not gold. The job was not what I thought it was. And I quit, and I was unemployed and pretty depressed. And as the story goes, there was an LA miracle that happened. And my boyfriend at the time introduced me to Larry King, who would have breakfast at the same deli in Beverly Hills 6 days a week. And I would go and have breakfast with Larry. And he really taught me how to ask questions. And it was like going to grad school, you know? And then I moved back to Chicago, and I did a morning show, and I missed LA, and I moved in with that boyfriend and ended up moving out 4 months later, and that did not go well. But I didn't have any money. And when I moved out, I was really stressed out. And so I moved into this tiny little apartment that had no windows. It was kind of a depressing place to live. And I was trying to get back on my feet. And all of a sudden, E! News had an audition for me. And since I had moved to LA, I wanted to work at E! News. And I was like, Danielle, this is it. You're finally old enough. You're finally not green enough. Like you put in the time, you did live TV, like this is your time. So I do the audition, I get to the next level. I do the next audition, get to the next level. Now it's like between me and 5 other people. And they fly me to New York last minute. I go do the audition, and I'm like, this is it. And I get a call that afternoon, and my agent was like, they're not going with you. I'm sorry. And I fell on the bed and started hysterically crying. And I'm not a crier in that way. Like, I don't take no's personally, but this one felt like if it wasn't going to happen now, it was never going to happen. And what was wrong with me, and how like all my sacrifices weren't worth it. And I was dating a new guy at the time. And he came to the hotel room, and it was kind of embarrassing because we were like, it was too new for me to be crying that hard in front of him. But he was like, okay, you can be upset for like a day, maybe 2 days. And then what's the plan? And I was like, well, there is no plan. Like, my life isn't like yours. He was an entrepreneur. And I was like, that you, in what I do, you have to wait for someone to hire you. And he's like, says who? And I was like, that's just how it goes. And he was like, well, what's the show you've always wanted to create? And I told him about what became Pretty Smart and now is Question Everything. And I told him about the card game I wanted to make. And he was like, well, we're going to do that. And I was like, first of all, I have no money. What do you mean we're going to do that? Like, these shows take money and card games take money. And he was like, okay, well, we're going to figure out how to make money, and then we're going to invest in yourself. And I was like, okay, I like this plan. And I started doing some social media stuff to try and make money. And the pandemic hit. And my job at IMDb stopped. My job at NBC stopped. And I thought, I'm going to make this show. I'm going to start virtually, which is low cost. And the show launched, and so on and so forth. But that moment on the bed, I thought it was over. And I've had so many moments since then where I'm like crying on the kitchen floor. Less now, but there was like a good 4 years where I had a lot of moments where I was going to give up. And one person said to me one time, welcome, you're part of the club. And that made me feel a lot better because, I mean, you both own your own businesses, so I know you know this, but it is not for the faint of heart. It does not come without a ton of really low moments behind the scenes that absolutely nobody sees except for maybe like your partner or your mom. And instead of viewing those as like these horrendous moments that you'll never get through, putting a new lens on it and saying like, you're part of this entrepreneurial club really made me feel better. And I think about that to this day.
I love your story. I just, no matter how many times I've heard pieces of it, I love it so much. And I didn't even know I had warm feelings towards an ex-boyfriend of yours. But now for this piece, I do.
I know.
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
He was actually a good ex-boyfriend.
put them in a special category.
Yeah.
But not to like sugarcoat it, but do you think looking back that some of those crying on the bed or just like brought you to your knees moments in hindsight with lots of distance in between were actually helpful redirects?
Oh, absolutely. Because I think sometimes you have to be that low and feel like you're out of options to figure out a new way. Otherwise, like you would just stay on the road. I would have just stayed in entertainment news.
Which wasn't feeding your soul. And
Yeah, it wasn't for me.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. But during them, they suck. They're really hard.
Well, I think they get farther apart. Like the pits of despair sort of get a little less pity, and they get farther apart. So you feel like, like you're not maybe going to hysterically cry this time.
It's so well said. I mean, the pits for me really usually had to do with finances. Like you're shaking your head. Yeah. Same with you.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you're building anything on your own and you're funding it, like at some point you're going to look at your bank account and see that you have $200 left. And you're like, how am I going to pay my employees this month? How am I going to pay my rent this month? And that is just a type of anxiety and stress that no one wants to go through.
Absolutely.
Okay. I know I could talk to Danielle all day.
I know.
Okay, I have one more question. I mean, I have a million, but I will narrow it down to one question. So, we're obsessed with connection. You live in a space of connection. Gina's obsessed with connection. So I was thinking about this concept. I'm sure most people would not articulate it exactly like this, but cardinal rules of connection. And so I have realized I'm personally really fixated on closing the loop, thanking people and showing gratitude when I get a generous introduction, and also not hoarding relationships, so that if two good people should meet and I can be the bridge, trying consistently to show up and be that person. And as one of my favorite connectors, I'm curious if you have any cardinal rules of connection.
I love your close the loop rule. I believe in that too. I think my biggest rule for myself is to make connections unprompted. And so I do believe you have to ask the people ahead of time. You can't just send an email because people get annoyed. It's too many emails. But if it really makes sense, I love connecting like people that I've interviewed, because I'm in the business of people. And so I get to meet really interesting people and heads of brands. And I'm like, oh, this makes sense. And when it makes sense to send an email unprompted, I think is such a gift. And then my big cardinal rule in life that I think applies to communication is to give more than you receive. Like I never, ever make a connection or do something expecting anything in return. And I will say that a lot of times they do come back in beautiful ways, and sometimes not from that person, but it's that person's friend or of a friend who heard something I did that was nice. But I think you got to do it from the bottom of your heart.
I love that. And you do. I think you operate with altruism and a really open heart, and karmically you are due for so much good in return. But I've witnessed that. I have a call this week with somebody that you connected me with. So you really live it. And I adore you. And I just want to say one more time, the Question Everything podcast is the best podcast for deep conversation, amazing people, learning how to engage in adult, mature, thoughtful discussion with people. It is just like appointment listening.
There is a new podcast in town.
This is like, and I love us, but let's be like your little sister, like your big sister podcast.
No, I think that co-host podcasts are so fun. Like everybody wants to hear banter. I'm curious how it's been so far.
Well, so Rachel and I, it was like not a long process, because we've been growing our friendship for a little over a year.
We're still new, like we're still in the honeymoon,
friends, which is so delightful, because we decided to be friends and we built a friendship brick by brick. And then we both have such unique perspectives when it comes to friendship, connection, networking, and relationships. And so I think we both started to see that we bring something unique but puzzle piece fit to what the other one represents. And I genuinely love Rachel's perspective and want her advice in my life. So who could be a better co-host?
I keep turning to look at you because I feel so
Yes,
funny not
such good
hugging you to this. But it is.
Do you guys
I would never do
disagree or
this
agree
alone.
more?
Too much agreement. We're probably too.
We agree a lot, but we also have a system that we developed already for disagreements.
Tell me.
But that. So, I proposed, and I think you agreed.
I did.
Okay. So we've only disagreed really about like one back of the house production thing. And so I said, okay, I think we both get a veto based on, if we disagree, based on whether we're feeling very passionate about that thing or extremely uncomfortable about that thing. So if it's like there's a piece of audio where like, yeah, it would play, it would be cute, but it makes me uncomfortable, I can say like, veto, I'm uncomfortable.
Oh, I like that.
Or if Rachel's like, I'm extremely passionate about this thing and I'm not uncomfortable, like her passion wins.
That's a really good idea. I feel like that must have come from years of working with other people and having employees.
Yes, and I stole it a little bit from Unreasonable Hospitality. Yeah.
Okay.
Have you read that, Danielle?
No, I don't know what that is.
I think you would like it.
Yes, this is Will Guidara, who wrote an incredible book, Unreasonable Hospitality. It is centered in the restaurant industry, but it's absolutely applicable across other areas of life. Cool. I owe you a book, so I'll send it to you. And Will doesn't know yet that in our email thread, I will be asking him to join this podcast at some point.
That's cool to have him on. I'll be listening.
I won't do well with that though, because if I've read your book and I'm looking you in the eye, like your words have been in my head and I've had like a relationship with you, like that's when I really don't do well with celebrity is if I've read your book, then it's over.
That's going to be a problem in the podcast world, Gina. You're going to have to get over that.
I know. I'm going to have to be cool.
We're all avid readers.
Yeah.
I want to have good authors. Actually, Will's married to Christina Tosi, the amazing founder of Milk Bar, who was so nice to the twins recently. So good people over there.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But to wrap this, Gina had the idea for me doing a podcast with her. She's done all the tech things, all the hard things. And then I get to reach out to people that are amazing and say, talk with us.
You know what I just realized, Rach?
What?
My good friend at Noon, who was the CEO, Kevin Rutherford, he actually, their company was the company that saved me from my financial despair in 2018 when I moved out of my apartment. And I did a lot of cool work with them, but I loved the brand so much. He's their new CEO at Tosi.
No way.
They just hired him.
I'm so happy. I just adore you. I love picking your brain, but not in a I need anything way, just because I want to hear your words of wisdom and your sage advice. And
me too. You give such good advice.
Thank you. This is just a love fest, basically.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for you guys.
I know. Danielle, I want to know. I'm like, I know. I want to know if you could pick a co-host to do a show with.
Oh my God.
Who you know already or don't. Who would it be?
I'm mentally trying to guess this
I
for
know.
you.
I mean, I'd love to learn from Oprah. That's such like an obvious thing. I do think it would be, I've always wanted to do a show where there's an older woman and a younger woman co-hosting because we haven't seen that yet. And I think like the diversity of perspectives is interesting.
I feel like Julia Louis-Dreyfus should pull you in.
That'd be cool.
Because she has that podcast interviewing older women about their wisdom.
Yes.
Yeah.
I really like her podcast. When her mom comes on at the end, though, I don't get it. Her mom doesn't add anything. Like, she's just like, Julia, you're great. It's like, okay. Like, after the interview's done, I'm done.
And now an ego boost.
If you actually listen to the very, very end of our podcast, after the music cuts out, Shira has a cameo.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Does she say something or does she sing something? What's happening?
You'll have to find out.
Okay,
She's like, hi, I'm Shira. And then when I played it for her, she wanted to be earlier in the podcast. And then she told me she didn't love my opening and I needed a joke.
And credits are a great spot.
Shira's everybody's best critic. So this is fantastic. Is she going to listen to every episode?
Not a chance. I'm not that interesting. She
No,
really
you
likes
are.
you, but she's not that fascinated by
Well,
what I do.
Shira's my life coach now.
Well, actually, so Danielle, and I'll do the whole thing about how great you are, but one of the things you do is content creation. And 10-year-old Shira has decided she's going to be, as I told you, a content creator. So we were on your website and she saw the magical words and she said, great, I guess Danielle can help me figure out my life. So
How funny is that?
it'll be another young woman knocking on your door asking for you to do all the work.
That's totally fine. For Shira, it's worth it. Shira's a star. Truly. She is.
Oh, I'm biased,
That's so
but
funny.
I like her. I love you. Thank you for doing this with us. I
love
appreciate
you guys.
it.
No, this is so fun. I'm really excited for your podcast journey. I'm going to be listening on the treadmill every week. So I can't wait.
Well, I listen to you at the nail salon, and every time, because I start furiously texting you with thoughts and just wishing I was part of the discussion.
That's the most fun part. I love when people text me their thoughts on the.
Good.
Oh my God, it's so fun. You guys are going to get it too. It's fantastic, especially
I text
from your
Sarah
moms.
during her podcast too, and I'm always like, I hope she likes this.
I mean, I can't end this conversation because I'm so into it.
I know.
But Danielle interviewed, am I saying Ashlyn correctly? Ashlyn Harris,
yeah.
who was a award-winning women's soccer player. And she had this killer line that I had to stop everything I was doing and message. She said she doesn't fuck with average people and that she wakes up every day to be extraordinary. And I was it was like a wind gust sent me back in my chair.
But I
Make
posted
that
that
my
clip after
obituary.
you texted me because I was like, oh, you're right. That's a good moment.
That's excellent.
So you actually have a lot of impact on my content creation.
Number one listener.
I am. I don't know how much of a fan I can be before it becomes creepy, but I am 100% invested in and love your podcast and love
Well,
you
now
so
I get
much.
to return the favor. I'm so excited.
Oh, well, thank you. Have a wonderful day, and I'm going to call you soon.
Okay. Mwah.
Mwah.
Bye, Danielle.
Bye.
Oh my gosh. Isn't Danielle the best?
She's the best. I clearly could not wrap up the conversation because I wanted to keep going and diving in, but I really loved our first interview.
Yeah. And she shared such an incredible cold connection story. Rachel.
Yes, which goes into our connection conversation. Okay, so Gina, when have you reached out to someone where you had no existing connection and something great transpired?
So I don't think I even have gotten to share this story with you.
No.
So it's going to be a new story for you, which is lovely. So as you know, I started writing a book about friendship. And so I'm deep in the research, working on the beginning chapters. But there is a researcher who speaks a lot about numbers associated with friendship and group size. His name is Robin Dunbar. He created a number called Dunbar's number. It's quoted everywhere. It's used as you've heard that this number.
Yes.
It's quoted everywhere and used as sort of the guiding principle for how big an office or a social group can and should be. 150 people is the maximum number of reciprocal relationships which can exist in a space. And so I was reading about a different number that he talked about because I would say he is the friendship statistician and mathematician. He's just created all of these numbers around friendship. He also created a number or found the number when people start losing friends, which is 25. And so I got curious because the number was found before COVID. I was curious about if the number had gone down.
And can you explain what the 25 means?
Yes, thank you for asking. So human beings are socially promiscuous until the age of 25. That's literally what's in
I
the
thought you
data.
meant 25 people.
Oh, God,
You
I
meant
wish.
The age of 25.
The age of 25. Great follow-up. So up until the age of 25, humans are socially promiscuous and just make a ton of friends. But after the age of 25, we start losing friends rapidly and never regain them at the same pace. It is
a friend shed.
It is a friend shed. I call it the friendship cliff. But it's a number that it has been backed up by data set after data set and their analysis by it. So I reached out to him to say, has this number gone down? Without thinking, because my curiosity was the driving force.
Sure.
He wrote back immediately.
You got to hear from him from Dunbar.
Yeah. He wrote back immediately, sent me a bunch of research papers, some sort of new guidance around what we know now about friendship. So that was just a delight.
Wait, I love that you followed your curiosity. Of course, you would email this expert. I'm thrilled he wrote you back. But again, because you probably were reaching out with positive intent and as a fan of the work and somebody who's genuinely interested in what he's doing, he had no reason not to respond to you. That's a great cold outreach.
It was actually, thinking back to what Danielle said today, I shared a stat from his work. I shared how I had used it. I shared how it had impacted me. And I asked a follow-up question. Do you have any recent data or know of anyone doing work around this? So it was not purposeful, but I'm sure flattering. Like, this random person has read my work.
Now you need to become friends.
Obviously, we're going to become friends.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I laugh because so much of my job is cold emails and pitching things that somebody doesn't even want to hear about. But I do have a really pivotal cold email story that forever changed my business.
Ooh, tell me.
And I had no idea when I was doing it. So what underpins this is, I think if you send a cold email trying to do a good deed for somebody else, that's pretty magical. So my former colleague and friend Emily was eyeballing a job opportunity, and she really wanted her resume to get to the right people. And as we all know, resumes travel further when you can send it to somebody inside the company. So she said, hey, do you know anybody at this company, Farmer's Fridge? And at the time I said, I don't, unfortunately, but I love you, Emily. You're so great. Let me poke around LinkedIn a little bit and see if I could find a contact. So as I'm looking on LinkedIn, I realize that a creative man, ad professional, if you will, Jonathan Hoffman, was consulting for Farmer's Fridge. And for context, I used to work at Leo Burnett, and Jonathan Hoffman was a really respected, revered, top of the heap creative when I was like early 20s. So he did not know me. I only knew him by reputation. He was a big name at the time. So I sent him a cold LinkedIn message, which I feel like is even more remote than even just like having somebody's personal email. And I just introduced myself to Jonathan and said I was trying to do a favor for my friend Emily, who is interested in this graphic design role. And if you would be so kind to share her resume so that it could get to the right people, I would really appreciate it. And to Jonathan's credit, he wrote me promptly back. He said he fully understood. He would be happy to share Emily's resume. That could have been the end of the story, and my company would look very different today. But I had this impulse that I'm so glad I followed, which I would encourage for anybody else who's in a friendly cold email exchange. I said, I've heard a lot about you over the years. I would really love the chance to meet. If you're ever up for coffee, it'd be great to hear your story. I did not have an ulterior motive. I truly just was interested to meet this person who I've been curious about. So we go to coffee, and he's charming and he's interesting. He tells great stories. I'm having a really good time. And he said, you know what? You should talk to Farmer's Fridge. I think you'd really get along with this woman named Shayna who works there. You guys just seem like you would vibe well. I'll just put you guys in touch. And because I try to trust when someone feels that an introduction should be made and they've assessed that there's going to be a chemistry fit, I just want to go with it. I'm like, sure, I'll talk to Shayna. So lo and behold, short version of the story, I do end up talking to Shayna, and I end up joining Farmer's Fridge as their PR consultant. And I've worked with Farmer's Fridge for 7 years now. Shayna has become an incredibly dear friend who then introduced me to Siete Foods, which has also now been my client for 3 years. And so who I work with today, the amount of years attached to that work, these phenomenal clients that I feel so lucky to represent, all stemmed from me sending a cold LinkedIn message to somebody I had never actually met at an old job, who was kind enough to have coffee and suggest an intro. So that is my favorite story. And because I worry so much about making sure the scales are balanced, not only did I try to thank Jonathan in the normal ways, but he did mention to me at one point that his son had graduated college and needed a job. And so I did find his son his first job.
There you go.
I don't think today he's currently employed there, but I felt like I was able to balance the scales a little bit by helping Jonathan's son get his first post-college job. So it's a longer story than I intended, but you never know when a cold email can change your life. So send the email.
Connection karma. Oh my gosh. Rachel, I don't know a better note that we could end on, but this has been another episode of The Connection Code, a podcast about friends, connections, and work, and really everything in between. This is a production by two friends, Rachel Gilman-Rishel and Gina Anderson Cohen. You can follow us on Instagram at Rachel Gilman Rischel and at Gina Anderson Cohen. And on LinkedIn for the professional friends by looking for our names. We both use 2 last names, so we've got that going for us. And hey, if you have a line to our dream connection, Danielle's dream connections, or if you just want to chat, shoot us a DM. We'd love to hear from you. Bye.
Bye.